Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rob. Let's draw Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Now, these two characters may not be that popular outside of comics. They're the twin kids of Magneto in the Marvel Universe. But they will very soon step into the forefront because they will be appearing in Avengers 2: The Age of Ultron, which is currently undergoing filming. For this composition, since I know I'm just going to have these two characters, it's going to be something similar to what we had with Jubilee and X-23. To start with, I ensured that I had a horizon roughly in between eye level between both characters, because that typically for portraits looks the best. And as you saw, I drew out the tops of the heads to ensure that I had good headroom, because if you draw the head a little too close to the edge of the page, it feels wrong. It's a bit difficult to explain, but if you look at any newscast, any type of talking head, any pundit on, pick your news channel of choice, the top of their head is only a small fraction below the edge of the screen, and it's for that simple reason. So that's what I was doing there. Alright, so drawing out my basic framework, made sure that I had the characters' torsos in view, and now I'm working out a few of the details of the costumes. There's nothing really too spectacular with either of these characters. Quicksilver especially is really boring because he's basically just wearing a t-shirt and pants. There's nothing really there. So to combat that, I made sure that Scarlet Witch was in the front. So at the very least, she has a few interesting things going on with her jacket, a couple pieces of jewelry, things of that nature. Now I'm adjusting the proportions of both characters from time to time because I need to make sure that they're both proportionately accurate, not just within themselves but in relation to each other. Quicksilver, being the older brother, being male, is going to be a lot bigger than his sister. So originally I sketched out both heads at roughly the same size, and so that was of course a mistake. So I had to scale up Quicksilver's head a bit. Now here I'm just fleshing in a few more details, mostly stitching in the clothing. When you have a really plain character design like we've got with Quicksilver, it helps to add in stitching to clothing just because that gives it a little more life, that adds a little more detail. Because otherwise you've just got simple flat shaded shapes and plain colors, and that's boring to look at. Okay, and here I've worked in a little bit of the face. Didn't do as much with Quicksilver's face because he'll mostly be obfuscated by shadow, being the character in the background, so I've worked that in, and now I'm just adding in tones. Remember, this is a multiply layer using just plain black, varying the levels of pressure to get darker or lighter tones. Now I'm adding a gradient so that I can very easily get the lighting effect to be focused mostly on the characters' faces. This is still a portrait. Just added in a little bit of noise to the background using a sponge brush. And now, using a multiply layer below all of the work that I've done with tones and lines, I'm adding in the flat colors. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch's color schemes can't really be changed. Quicksilver is blue, Scarlet Witch is of course scarlet, red. So I chose a green background because that makes it a trinary color scheme. See, green would have worked out the best because it's uniquely opposed to both blue and red on the color wheel, I guess is the best way to say it. It would have worked out it works out the strongest. Now here I'm adding in an amber highlight just on the rim of each character to sort of make them pop out against the green background. And now we're just working in details. I'm starting with the face on Scarlet Witch. Nothing too crazy here, just making sure that I'm developing a consistent lighting scheme, because I will later apply this to Quicksilver's face and then the rest of the two characters' bodies. As you're working, it really helps to remember that you have to keep flipping your work horizontally. You want to mirror it so that you are constantly checking for any sort of weird skews in perspective, any kind of weird anatomy, things like that. Because it's easy, especially when you're working in little details like this, to sort of lose perspective. You want to talk about bad habits? One bad habit I've developed, and I'm still struggling to break even now, is that years of anime have conditioned me that whenever I see a male character with white hair, I want to make him as effeminate and bishonen as possible. So here I am, struggling to try and make Quicksilver here a little more masculine when I step back and realize that he was a little too much like his sister. Basically, though, to fix that, all I really had to do was widen the chin a bit and sort of use sharper lines for the shadows around his face. Not really soften them out as much as I did on Scarlet Witch. Now, in Avengers 2, the actor playing Quicksilver has this very curled hair. It's and they tried their best to straighten it out for the costume, but it's still very curly, especially toward the ends and on the parts where it's a lot shorter. Because you can tell, I guess, that they couldn't get a flat iron to those pieces. So when I was rendering Quicksilver's hair, as you saw, I'm using quick strokes from darker with lighter colors on top of darker colors, so that I get this very efficient way of rendering this sort of curly, knotty hair. Now toward the top, you saw that I changed it. I switched to the lightest color, and I was able to just use long sweeps to indicate. Because the thing to remember, when you're doing curly hair, it can become very complicated if you try and think of every single individual strand, but unlike straight hair, you don't have to render each lock individually or even as a cluster. You sort of just indicate lights and shadows, because it's so complicated that there's really no way for the human eye to discern, you know, an individual hair or anything like that. So you just sort of treat it like a texture, and less so like you would typically do hair. Now here I'm just rendering out simple forms, simple lights and shadows. On the parts where Quicksilver's hand rests on Scarlet Witch's shoulder, I don't know if you can notice this in the video in standard res, but if you look closely, I've sampled a bit of the red and added that to Quicksilver's arm, and conversely I've taken a bit of the blue and I'm going to add that to Scarlet Witch's shoulder. Basically, all things in the real world tend to... anything that receives light in the world is itself a light caster. It's a light source. Da Vinci was known for writing this down way back in his day even. It's the idea that light doesn't just stop when it hits a surface. It bounces off of that surface and can light something else, but it's not a perfect reflection, right? So the light beam, the photon, absorbs a little bit of the wavelength of the surface that it hits, or at least it loses energy and becomes a different wavelength. So when it hits something else, it's now no longer the pure light that it started as. It's now slightly tinted red, slightly tinted blue, or orange, or whatever the surface was. So when whenever you're rendering lighting on two surfaces close together, you want to sort of mix both of the colors between the two surfaces. It adds a little bit of believability, a little bit of credibility to the scene that you wouldn't have otherwise had. It's a subtle thing, but it makes a huge difference. There are a lot of games now, now that GPUs and CPUs are much more powerful and they're able to do this in real time, there are a lot of games that take advantage of this. It's called global illumination. Look at any screenshot from any Unreal Engine game and you'll see quite a bit of that at work. And I think that's something that is worth taking note of and adding to your own artwork. It makes a big difference.